all of the teams are hard at work. Formula One will be required to race with next-generation power units in 2026, which will propel cars with drastically altered aerodynamics above the floor. While the technical standards for 2026 are being finalised, the teams are hard at work developing the first phase of the new power units. And as things are standing right now, Mercedes is leading the pack. Could we see Mercedes dominating again in the future? The new power units, for example, will not include the pricey MGU-H, which is the motor generator unit heat, something that would have had an influence on F1's sophisticated technology development. However, the cost-cutting mantra has prevailed in recent years, thus this part had to go. Engineers are now working out how to compensate for the performance loss caused by the lack of energy recovery. It'll not be a simple task, given that the engines will produce 3 times the amount of power, increasing from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, which is about 470 horsepower. This will account for about half of the overall engine power. Some engineers believe that we'll face nasty surprises if aerodynamic efficiency does not improve by the beginning of 2026. The restrictions are not balanced in terms of engine efficiency. Despite the removal of the extremely hefty MGU-H, this will prevent the engines from becoming considerably lighter. To store and transfer energy, the battery pack and the new MGU-K will be substantially heavier. Some significant new features will be added to heat engines. They will, however, be essentially simpler and less expensive. Titanium has been banned and substituted with aluminium alloys, which have a far lower combustion ratio according to the regulations. As a result, oil corporations are being pushed to create carbon-neutral fuels. This will need extreme efficiency. The higher it is, the less fuel is used for the same amount of power. But that's not all. The intake pipes, for example, will no longer be changeable, but will have a set height. Given the limited use of variable height on turbo engines, this approach is compatible with the FIA's low-cost objectives. Magneti Marelli will supply the injectors, which will be standard. After a vote in the commission, the Italian-Japanese business won the contest, defeating its competitor Bosch, who also currently supplies Ferrari. 2026 may appear far away. However, there is a sense of urgency surrounding the new building philosophy and engine ambitions. Obviously, the development race has begun in full force. The new requirements have drawn the attention of 2 additional significant manufacturers. Audi will compete in Formula One alongside Ferrari, Mercedes, Renault and Honda. Ford will also participate as part of their cooperation with Red Bull powertrains. According to reports, someone recently recommended increasing the flow of petrol to solve the problem of energy recovery, but the option was rejected. As Christian Horner stated some time ago, there is a concern of creating Frankenstein cars. After all, many of the 2026 cars' aerodynamic principles will be centered on engine efficiency. The first full engines will be tested in 2024, and Mercedes is ahead of its competitors in this regard. Even the creation of new engines is constrained. Engineers will have 700 hours per year for the combustion engine and 500 hours for the ERS from now until the end of 2026. From 2027 to 2030, the ICE and ERS hours will be reduced to 500 and 400 respectively. Then, there is a considerable to-scale constraint concerning the powertrain cells, which will run on a maximum of 9 test benches. Obviously, the cost cap, which ranges from $95 million to $135 million, governs all of this. It is no surprise that one of the goals of launching new cars is to reduce weight. To do this, some of the development limits may be relaxed. The FIA is highly focused on making the cars lighter, but also smaller. The current F1 cars weigh an incredible 798 kilograms, with new engines and countermeasures set to push the weight far past 800. The initial stage is to lose at least 20 kilograms before considering further weight loss through the regulation cycle. The width of the automobiles has been lowered from 200 centimeters to 190 centimeters, and the wheelbase has been reduced to at least 340 centimeters from 360 centimeters. As a result, there will be a 40% decrease in downforce. It all sounds far away, but Mercedes is already months ahead of the other teams. The Brackley-based team was a team to beat the last time the engine got overhauled. So, are we about to see another period of domination from the Silver Arrows? Mercedes have finally opened up about their 2026 engine. The general director of Mercedes' high-performance powertrains engine business, Hywel Thomas, predicts a mammoth amount of development and innovation by manufacturers ahead of F1's next regulations reset in 2026. Despite attracting a company of Audi's stature to join from 2026, as well as a return of Ford and Honda, with Red Bull and Aston Martin, Respectively, the plans have recently come under fire from reigning world champion Max Verstappen, who warned F1 is heading in the wrong direction and claimed the cars will require a counterintuitive driving style. Verstappen also expressed worries that engines might once again become the major performance difference between teams, warning of a massive development war between manufacturers. F1's engine manufacturers are required to hold show-and-tell sessions with their powertrains this season as part of the sport's efforts to improve technical transparency, with Hywel Thomas, who succeeded Andy Cowell as the head of Mercedes HPP, the first to appear in front of the media. While certain parts will stay identical in 2026, Thomas highlighted that the task of planning for regulatory changes is significant. He said, "2026 is a very different beast. The V6 section is actually very similar, although there are some changes in that. The biggest one being fuel flow is going to reduce, and the fuel is going to change. But the V6 is actually not that dissimilar. We are removing the MGU-H, that's gone. And that was really seen as a blocker for new entrants, so by removing that removes one of the reasons that new entrants couldn't come in, so that was an important part. The other side of it is the increase in the electrical system, so we'll have 350 kilowatts increase from the current 120 kilowatts, so making up the difference of the performance that's lost from the engine because of the fuel reduction being made up by the electrical machines. The regulations allowed us to start running V6s in the middle of last year, and that's very much what we did, and I'm sure we weren't alone in doing that. It's a big old journey, that's for sure. There's going to be a lot of development work, a lot of heartache, but I think we're all probably starting at the same point because the regulations allow us to do that. Mercedes gained a head start on the competition ahead of the commencement of F1's move to V6 hybrid engines in 2014, setting the groundwork for the team's historic run of 8 straight Constructors' Championships until 2021. Thomas detailed the process of discovery in the years running up to 2014 and expressed disappointment that F1 did not do more at the time to highlight technological and engineering advances. He said, "I was very fortunate to be involved in the development of this PU in those years, 2012-13, and if you think of what we knew a battery could do in early 2012 to what it was actually racing by 2014, that was a mammoth task. Nobody knew how to do it when we started. If you look at the MGU-H, I remember doing some surveys of an MGU-H and saying, an electric motor that's running at above 100,000 RPM, how many of those are there in the world? Well, there weren't any, and the only ones that were running about 3 kilowatts, and we needed something that did 50 to 60 kilowatts. So there was no reference at all for this technology in those early years, and that's where the innovation was absolutely fantastic during that period of time. The work that was done, the hard graft in order to create that technology, was immense with this power unit, absolutely immense. I'm slightly sad that we didn't talk about it more at the time because I don't think people appreciated how much work that was and the levels of innovation. It's a good reference what we're doing in 26. I would say a mammoth amount of innovation is possible. If we want to be successful, and we do want to be successful, we've got some huge challenges and we're going to have to do some special things to deliver on those in much the same way that when we had the run-up in 2013. There was still some stuff that needed fixing and still some performance needed finding until the last minute, so I think we've got a long way to go and it's very exciting. We'll develop some ideas that I'm sure will be relevant for the industry. Thomas singled out the battery as a point of special interest in the development of the 2026 engines, implying that manufacturers might be rewarded handsomely if they can master this component of the powertrain. I think the battery is definitely an interesting area for potential development in those 26 regulations, he said. What we'll be looking at is far more of a power-dense battery rather than the energy-dense batteries that we see in general EVs. I don't think there's anything we can hook onto in somewhere like Mercedes. The developments that they're doing, we're going to have to be slightly different than that to get the sort of high-power batteries that we need. I'm sure every company is looking carefully at what they're going to do with the battery because it's definitely an area which, if you do a good job of it, will likely lead you to having good lap time. The big question is if Mercedes months ahead of the rest will result in real gains in the long term. Could it be enough? Especially when aerodynamics will stay important as well. What do you think? Will Mercedes benefit from these engine changes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.